Alright, we're back down at my shop. Brought the cylinder down, and as you can see, the gasket needs to be scraped on the top side, and that crusty dowel pin needs to be addressed and taken out of there. Also got to scrape the gasket and make sure it's flat on the bottom side before I set it up in the boring bar. I'm going to do all those things, but I did set up the dial bore gauge already just to check taper, and it's got about a 1/2 thousandths taper in it in the wear area, which is not uncommon for a Honda 70 that's had a little of its life used up in 2 or 3 generations of kids. They go forever. The only thing that kills these engines, to be honest with you, is the cam chain slips and goes out of time and bends the valves. And you take it apart and you have to do something with the cylinder at that point, because it won't seal the rings back up when you put it back together. Anyway, I've got a new piston on hand, and we're going to set it up in the boring bar here after we get all the old gaskets scraped off, and make one swipe down, show you where the wear is at in the cylinder in the next video. And oh, by the way, this is the lube I'll use, the penetrant lube, to spray around that dowel pin. And you know, I'm not sure. This is definitely not sponsored in the video, but boy, that's a good product, and I've used tons of them over the years. That seems to work about the best on really frozen, rusty stuff. But regardless, this is going to be it for this video. Just more or less showing you the fact that the cylinder does have some wear in it, and you know, the fact of the matter is I'm pretty lucky to have my own boring bar, and I can do all this right in my own shop. But you know, if you're building a Honda 70, it's not a big deal to take your cylinder to a reputable machinist and give them the specs, the piston clearance that you need, and they'll do a good job for you most of the time. I haven't heard too many horror stories with small cylinders. They're usually pretty straightforward, and I used to work at couple different machine shops and had real good success for the most part, as long as I had the right clearances for the type of piston being used. And this is an aftermarket piston, but it's a cast piston, so I can use the same specs as for a Honda piston, more or less, out of a Honda spec book or Climber or Haynes or any of the aftermarket manuals. They'll usually give you a factory spec, and you can go by that with a cast piston. If it's forged, if it's something else and it's forged, just remember they have to have more clearance. If you're building a 2-stroke or something like that, that requires a little more in-depth research sometimes on the piston you're using, if they don't come with a spec to find out what it is. But regardless, getting off the subject here a little bit, the cylinder will get cleaned up, and I'll bolt it down to the top of the boring bar and just use these clamps right here and clamp her down and center it up. That'll be the next video. Stay tuned.